Thanks, appreciate you guys being here tonight. So we're talking about parenting with grace and truth, and what we talked about last week is the challenge between the relationship and the responsibility as a parent, the truth and the grace. So am I being too kind, too nice, too hard in terms of my relationship? Am I being too strict, too lenient in terms of the rules? Finding that balance, I found, was the most challenging aspect of being a parent. I have 2 adult children, and we'll tell some stories probably about both of them. One was pretty easy to raise. The other one was ADHD and impulsive, and was a challenge at times, but turned out very good and doing well. So last week we focused on the grace aspect a lot, and where the idea of grace and truth comes from is John 1:14, and this is a description of Jesus. He was filled with grace and truth, and that's what we want to have in our relationships. You got to be authentic, you got to be real, you got to have a certain value system, a certain truth, certain boundaries in relationships, but you also have to have things like communication, forgiveness, empathy, to establish some credibility so that when you have to have issues, discussions about issues, about truth subjects, it's easier to have those when you have a relationship. And so last week we really emphasized the grace. This week we're sort of going to talk about coping skills, staying calm as a parent, which affects both the grace aspect, the relationship aspect, and your ability to implement behavior management techniques or the truth aspect of it. Did want to point out the first sheet, let me go back here, on your handout, this is the correct information. This is the information when I was working. The WordPress website really has nothing on it. jhodgesphd.net is my current website, and I'm actually hoping to possibly take some of the video from this series and it end up on the website. So if you miss a session and want to go back and look at it, you'll be able to. So that's the correct information compared to what you have. So, staying calm. Why is it important to stay calm as a parent? And obviously that can be a challenge sometimes. But the importance is what you model is very significant with your kids. What they see you do, they are going to follow. And this has more influence than you realize. I told the story last week about the way I talked on a phone years ago when we had a wall phone, and my wife was laughing at my son because it was the exact posture that I had. So even little things like that, your kids will pick up on. So what you model is really important. So when you're frustrated, what you model is going to help them as well. Better decision making. The calmer you can stay, the better the decision making you're going to make in terms of appropriateness of consequences, how you communicate, decision making, those kinds of things. If you're frustrated, one of the things we know from the abuse literature is parents who spank their kids when they're frustrated are going to hit with more intensity than they think. And a lot of times this is when abuse occurs, not from a reasonable spanking, but from a spanking when people are frustrated and angry and they hit with more intensity than they realize. So this is, if you are frustrated and your frustration's growing and you get out of control, this is when you do things like ground your kids for 6 years and things like that you later have to go back and say, I didn't really mean it, and so forth. You're reinforcing that the idea of controlling your behavior even when you're frustrated with someone. Again, this is kind of what you model. Even though I may be angry, there is still a certain type of behavior that is reasonable and expected of us in order to facilitate relationships, not hurt those we care about. And so it's a good modeling technique. It's good for your kids to see that. You can be frustrated and still engage in conversations with people in terms of decision-making, problem-solving, communication. So what is the biggest obstacle to staying calm? Any thoughts on this?
Sometimes, like if you're in a time crunch, like if I have to get somewhere and my kid refuses to brush their teeth or get dressed and I've got to be at work.
Yeah.
Or they've got to get on the bus.
Yeah, two most difficult times for most families is bedtime and morning. You know, it's like, I'm going to put you in timeout for 30 minutes when it's your bedtime. It doesn't work, and so those time constraints do have a big role in it, and some of the more difficult times. What I believe is the most, there's a lot of factors that can create, but what I think is the biggest issue for parents is anxiety. What's the two most dangerous animals on earth? A scared parent and a defensive teen. When you, as a parent, get scared, you get crazy. It's a fight or flight response. It's the way we're wired. And so if you get fearful, you feel the need to defend yourself, fight or flight takes over, and that's when you overreact or either shut down. Same thing with your teen. When they get defensive and feel like they have to defend themselves, they go into fight or flight mode. And that's when you can see some verbal aggression, or you can see them just totally shut down on you. And so trying to avoid or manage defensiveness. I mentioned last week I did a lot of anger management groups with the Department of Juvenile Justice. And after doing these a number of years, I concluded that it's not so much kids want their way. That's part of the anger. But a large part of it is they don't know how to handle defensiveness. And often they misinterpret things that really are not that big a deal as personal attacks, feel the need to defend themselves, and then rationalize being aggressive. This is called attribution theory. There's a guy up at Vanderbilt, Kenneth Hodges, that has done a lot of work that's demonstrated that kids with aggression problems in school make a lot of negative attributions. For example, somebody bumps into them in the hallway at school, you did that on purpose. They jump to these conclusions, which then, if I think you're trying to make me look bad, you're trying to do something to harm me, that justifies my aggression. And so this attribution is really important. It's important for you as parents to watch this also. So, how do you stay calm? I'm going to give you kind of the cornerstone of cognitive therapy. Well, not cooperating, so we'll go with that. There we go. Man is not disturbed by events, but by the view he takes of them. This is Epictetus. He's a Stoic philosopher, and this is a cornerstone of cognitive therapy. You hear a lot about cognitive behavior therapy these days. It's one of the most evidence-based therapies we've ever had in therapy. And the idea is it's not what happens that upsets us, it's the way we think about it. It's our perceptions. And so I'm going to just go through a model real quick with you to try to help you, give you some tools. And this is something that you try to model for your kids as well. The ABCs. So something happens, and what we normally think is when something happens, there's a consequence, the emotions or the behavior. So we go from A to C. But if you think about it, if the event is the cause of the reaction, then everybody who experiences that event should react the same way, because the event would be causing the reaction. Doesn't work that way. So there's something else at work, and that's where you get the belief. So the model is something happens, you think about it, and the way you think about it develops these belief systems that becomes the basis of your emotions and your behavior. So, real simple example here. We'll start with C. This is kind of how we use it. You start with the emotion. One of the accusations against cognitive behavior therapy is you're denying emotions. That's not true. You're starting with emotional awareness. So you're experiencing negative emotion. You're scared. And then what has happened? It's the middle of the night, and you just heard a noise at the window. And so what are the reactions, behavioral reactions, that you might engage in if you hear a noise at the window? What would you do? Go look. You might call 911. You might scream. You might pull the covers over your head. What? Absolutely. I live in Milton. Or you might go back to sleep. So you got one noise and all these possible reactions. How can you have one noise and this many reactions? It depends on your belief. If you believe it's a burglar or a monster or whatever, then you call 911, you scream, you pull the covers, you get the gun. If you don't know what it is, you go look, and if you think it's the cat, the wind, the branch of a tree, whatever, then you might look or you go back to sleep. So it's not the noise that is causing the reaction, it's your interpretation. And these interpretations are learned. Some of us have a DNA that just makes us more anxious than others. Some of us have a DNA that makes us more impulsive than others. And so the biological aspect is really important. And then your experiences, what you've been taught in life, forms a lot of these beliefs, and learning to recognize these beliefs and these patterns is really important. And we're going to talk about some of the beliefs with as parents that can affect that. So, and the way you use this is you start with the emotion, you identify the event, and then the beliefs. You want to identify what your beliefs are. And then D is dispute. 2 criteria you want for your beliefs. Is it true and is it helpful? So that's the criteria. Scripture talks a lot about the power of our thinking. Romans 12:2, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Verses in Colossians, Ephesians, about thinking and the power that it has. And so the way we think about things is very powerful. If I think I'm in control versus God's in control, how does that affect your reactions in situations? So, the power of our thinking I think it is very, very powerful. So you identify the belief, and then what proof do I have? For it to be true, you must be able to prove it. So what this eliminates is mind reading. Can I read your mind? I'm an expert in human behavior, but I cannot read your mind. I don't know why you're here tonight. Maybe you're interested in being a better parent. Maybe you like chicken tenders. Maybe your spouse said, I really want you to go, and you wanted to score a few brownie points. I don't know. I can't read. None of us can. Only God can read the heart of man. When Samuel went to anoint a new king, he went through all the brothers, and then it was the scrawniest one. And he said, man looks at the outward appearance, God looks at the heart. Only God can judge the heart of man. And it's important to kind of keep this in mind. You know your kids, and you're going to have a lot of insight when they've done something wrong. When they walk in the room, you can kind of pick up on it. Just be careful and verify it to be sure, because sometimes you're going to be wrong, and then you make accusations that hurts the relationship and doesn't help resolve whatever issue is going on. So you come up, you challenge these beliefs, and then once you've challenged the belief, you come up with a new belief, you put it into action, and you evaluate it. So this is a model, it's called the ABCs. It's kind of the cornerstone of cognitive therapy. I taught it to most of my patients when I was working. Any thoughts or questions about this specifically? Okay. So these are some of the irrational beliefs of a parent that will escalate, have the potential, and these are just totally random. You can come up with your own as you go through this. You're doing this just to make me mad. What's wrong with this? You're mind reading. Only God can judge the heart of another person. You don't know what their motivation are. Remember, they are stupid, they're hormonal, they're immature, and the brain is still developing. They're not necessarily evil, any more than any of the rest of us as sinners. I mean, we all have that nature within us. We have the good nature and the bad nature. But they're going to do stupid things. And sometimes it has nothing to do with you. And so be careful personalizing it. I know you are thinking you do not have to do anything I say. Again, if you think this way, what does it do to your frustration level? Shoots it up. And it keeps going up and keeps going up, and then you yell or you restrict them for 6 years or whatever it may be that is an overreaction and not going to help anything. You will never succeed in life because you are so lazy. Can you prove the future? No. Again, you need to have proof for it to be a true statement. As a parent, you're going to have fears like this. I went through this with my son. I was accused of being a perfectionist because I expected him to do homework. And there were times when I thought, he's so irresponsible, what's going to happen? Fortunately, I didn't say that to him. But somewhere deep down inside, I also knew that one day he'd find a passion, and when he became passionate about something, he would excel at it. And he did. My friends will think I'm the worst parent possible if I let you do this. Worrying about what other parents think and so forth. Predicting what other parents are going to think. Mind reading. And again, you see the lies in this and you see the harm in this. And that's what this irrational thinking, and it's so easy to think this way, feel anxious, and then think, just kind of use that, your emotions, to reaffirm these beliefs. If I let you go surfing, you'll drown. Over anxious parent. Whose issue is this? Whose anxiety is this? Is it the kid or is it the parents? And sometimes we have to stop and look at our own anxieties and the effects that happen. Johnny likes reading and practicing piano. He will be successful one day. You can't predict success either. I mean, you can't say just because the kid's doing good right now that they will do good in this. We can't predict. You got to be consistent. It's not just we can't predict the bad. We can't predict the good either. Are there things that increase the probability? Absolutely. But can we 100% predict it? No. All you ever want to do is play video games. Key word there is all. When you use those absolute statements, everyone, every time, no one, it's probably untrue. And what does that do to your emotions? It hikes it up. And so using those absolutes is really important in terms of your own emotional management, not just as a parent, but in, life itself. All right, we'll go on through these. You can stay in calms. We talked a lot about your thinking. Philippians 4:8, one of my favorite verses. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any moral excellence, if there is any praise, dwell on these things. So the idea that you want it to be true, you want it to be helpful. That's the way you're thinking, and that's the importance of managing your own thoughts. Managing your own thoughts before you try to manage your child's behavior is really important. So do you see how these beliefs are untrue and unhelpful? Do you see how they can escalate your emotion and increase your frustration to the point that it will impact your ability to make effective decisions with your kids? Can you think of other irrational beliefs that parents may have?
You never listen to anything I say.
Yeah, those absolutes, you never. If they listen one time in their life, then it's a false belief. And so a lot of the time you don't listen may be a fair statement. But never is probably untrue. And so trying to get away, because those extreme statements like that tend to really escalate your emotions. So catching your own thoughts is important. So I want to spend a minute talking about the dangers of accommodation. And particularly if you have an anxious child, this is important. Accommodation is any action parents engage in with the purpose of alleviating their child's anxiety or stress. So you try to eliminate your child's anxiety and stress. And this is a normal desire of parents. We don't want to see our kids uncomfortable. But what is the reality? There are going to be events in their life that they will be uncomfortable with. There are going to be events in your life that you will be uncomfortable with. So one of the things that is important is sometimes you normalize anxiety as this is a normal human reaction. Situations that it's typical to have anxiety or new situations that you haven't been in before. Unpredictable situations. Situations where you are being evaluated and the consequences may have significance. But think about when you've started a new job, the first day going in to a new situation, and you don't know what the rules are, what the environment is like. You're probably going to have anxiety. So your child is going to have situations where it is normal to have anxiety. The risk is when a child has anxiety and then you allow them to avoid, or you help them avoid the situation. So anxiety goes up, and then you help them avoid whatever it is that's making them anxious. What's going to happen to the anxiety? It's going to go down. What are they learning from this process? Learn to avoid. So the next time something is difficult or challenging and it makes them uncomfortable, they avoid. And the pattern just gets worse and worse. And this is what we see with anxious kids. And so part of good anxiety treatment is gradually increasing exposure to whatever they are anxious about. You know, if they're anxious about going upstairs to a bedroom at night when it's dark, then you get them to gradually walk up the stairs and then go down the hallway, and this can take several nights, and eventually go into the room. But if you allow them to avoid, then the idea is that something might be in there, and if anything makes you scared, avoid it. So there's a lot of writing out now about the importance of learning to be uncomfortable. One of my themes that I've been thinking a lot about and plan to do some writing on is, in order to be comfortable, you have to learn to be uncomfortable. Because if you fear being uncomfortable, then you won't try anything new. You'll give up when things are difficult. And that's just not a recipe for success and having a good life. Steph Curry, basketball player, was on the Golf Channel doing an interview, and he said, you cannot have success without distress. And I think there's a lot of truth in that when I got my PhD, I was divorced, changed jobs, moved, became a single parent, and applied for my PhD to enter graduate school all within 6 months. And I would be doing fine. I'd just kind of at work, took care of work, go home, take care of home, and so forth, and be doing fine. And somebody would come along and say, are you sure you're not depressed? And I would stop and say, well, maybe I am. Maybe. And it's like, wait a minute, I was fine until they said that. And so we are capable of handling a lot. And that's the idea that you want your child to believe in. There's a term that I think is more important. Self-efficacy is more important than self-esteem. Self-efficacy is a belief I can be effective. Self-esteem is the idea that if I make you feel special, somehow you're going to behave better. And to me, that's the cart before the horse. When you do things and accomplish things, you feel special, you gain confidence, you believe in yourself. And so the self-esteem is kind of like, okay, stand in front of the mirror and tell yourself you're wonderful 7 times during the day. Well, you have a kid who's been lying, cheating, failing school, fighting with friends, and so forth, and is going to stand in the mirror and say, I'm wonderful. The kid's not going to believe it. Again, it goes back to the truth. And so you have to create some truth, and if you just try to make things soft and easy in terms of avoidance, then your child is not going to develop the perseverance, the coping skills that they need to be successful. Now, do we need to have empathy and say, yeah, I know this is hard, I know this is scary? Absolutely. So it's empathy, what we talked about last week, empathy for the emotion, accountability for the behavior. I've worked with kids with school refusal who refuse to go to school. And the goal is to try to get them back in school as quickly as possible. And it can be pretty ugly sometimes, and I hate it, but I know it's best for the child. If we let them just keep avoiding, then the anxiety is going to get worse, and the problem will get worse. And so it's really important to be compassionate, but also to be firm in those situations, especially with kids. Now, with kids with anxiety, you want to give them some coping skills, some tools to use so that they're not just thrown into this negative emotion without some tools. That's important. What we know about the accommodation is that it has shown to actually increase anxiety and avoidance rather than help it. So, and then the last statement, to be comfortable, you must learn to be uncomfortable. Any questions about anxiety in kids, just in general? Yes?
Could accommodation also be seen as trying to fix their, like, you're trying to fix their problems for them?
It can be you trying to fix their problems or run interference. We talked a little bit last week about the helicopter parent. Is a parent who's hovering over the child and taking care of everything for them. Well, the new one is the lawnmower or snowplow, where you try to mow everything down so they won't have to deal with any difficulties. So yes, you want to give them the responsibility to try to deal with things. My son was being hit on the school bus, being punched by a kid when he was in, I think it was middle school. And so he was complaining about it and said, have you talked to the bus driver? No. Well, you need to talk to the bus driver or I will get involved. You're not going to allow yourself to be hit. And he did. He talked with the bus driver and the problem was solved, and I didn't have to get involved. I hear so many, when I was working, so many episodes of neighborhood squabbles where the parents end up in the squabbles rather than the kids trying to resolve things and so forth. And again, that's kind of where the parents take over. Are there times where you need to step in? Yes. But try to let your child handle it first and give them, because if they handle it and they have some success at it, how are they going to feel about themselves? Yeah, they're going to feel better, and they're going to have a new set of tools to go forth in life with. So I think that's really important. Other questions about anxiety, stress?
Have advice for a single parent, the anxiety of trying to be mom and dad with the kids, and I mean, you said you were a single parent as well, and just, I think my kids they definitely adapted very well. My daughter never knew her dad, but my son we've been through all the phases, and we're finally on we went through angry, like I'm the only one there, so I'm the only one to blame, and he was only 3 when his dad just abandoned us. So,
Right.
you know, and so then we lost everything. We lost everything all at once, and so we had to move. We couldn't live the life we were living. And he's just like, Mom, why'd you take away this and why'd you take away that? And now all the people are gone and everything's gone. And thankfully, I actually professionally worked with therapy with kids, and I was a horse trainer, but I did horse therapy with special needs, ADHD, autism, all the things. So the staying calm and the working through it, God gave me tools that prepared me to have to go through all this. But now it's kind of, sometimes I don't know. It comes up a lot, oh, they have you see other kids have a dad, and they'll just say, well, our dad's probably sad, or our dad's this, they're just inventing this idea of these things, and I know that there's a discomfort there that they're
Yeah, I mean, that's significant, and, I think it's important to be truthful with kids at a reasonable level. You don't say things like, your dad loves you if dad's not coming around. You let the kid decide what their own feelings are. Because if you say dad loves you, but they don't feel loved, then the person who is their rock is saying this is what you should be feeling, but that's not what they're feeling. It puts them in conflict. So the idea of listening to them and what they describe as their feelings is important. Even in those situations, what I encourage is empathy for emotions, accountability for behavior. I understand you're upset, I understand you're angry, but you don't throw things at people or whatever it may be. You don't say unkind things. You still expected to behave at a certain standard, even though the emotions are very understandable. And that's what we all, that's the whole idea of self-control, self-management, maturing, is basically learning to do the right thing rather than what we feel like doing. If I'd done everything I felt like doing, I probably wouldn't be standing here today. And I doubt any of you would be sitting here today. So the whole idea of self-management, maturing, and so forth is learning to do the right thing rather than what I feel like doing. If you look at it from a religious perspective, am I going to do things God's way or am I going to do things my way? Which one's going to work out best for me? Seems like every time I try to do it my way, it doesn't go so well. And I hurt someone or, have unrealistic expectations and I'm disappointed or angry or frustrated. So I appreciate you sharing that. So one of the goals of parenting is not and coping in general is the idea of not just venting emotions, but solving the problem. So, for example, I have a flat tire. I can pull over on the side of the road, I can cry, I can scream, I can cuss the people that made the tire, I can kick the tire, but eventually I got to fix the tire. Well, you can do the same thing with your kids when they have a problem. You can yell, scream, cry, whatever, but eventually you want to figure out, okay, how do we solve this problem? How do I train them to be more effective in dealing with this and me be more effective at dealing with this? And so the idea of trying to get to problem solving is really important. That's the ultimate goal. I'm upset, I'm frustrated, not doing homework at school. It's normal to be angry and frustrated, but just venting that frustration, how's that going to help you or the child? You got to figure out what the problem is, why homework is not being done, or why they're not doing well in school, and then come up with a plan to try to fix it. So problem solving is really important. So I'm going to talk about a problem-solving model here, and cognitive coping, changing the way you think, and problem-solving to me are two of the most useful tools you have as a parent, and you can try to train in your kids. If they can cope with things, think differently about things, and they can problem solve, it's going to really increase the chances of better mental health. So, on the screen here, some of you may have done this exercise before, but I want you to do it now. And if you've done it, just humor me and go with the flow. You have 9 dots. I want you to connect all 9 dots with 4 straight lines without tracing without picking up your pencil. So it's one continuous motion of connecting all 9 dots with 4 straight lines. So I'd like for you to try to do that now. All right, anybody got it? Okay, well, let me show you. We won't spend too long on this, but show you the solution. So what kept you from solving the problem? Yeah. So often we have these preconceived notions of the way things are supposed to be, and we don't think outside the box. We're not creative. And to be a good parent, you need to be creative, because they're going to be one step ahead of you on a lot of stuff. Technology. Good luck keeping up with them. You know, they're going to be a lot smarter than you are for most of you when it comes to technology. So you have to be creative. You have to think about. So what limits our problem solving? Beliefs. It can't be done. It's too hard. This is unreasonable. One of the statements I hear when I suggest reinforcement, I will have parents say, "I'm not going to bribe my child." And I clarify, bribery is paying someone to do something illegal. I'm not asking you to bribe your child. I'm not asking you to get them to do something illegal. And then I ask them if they're whatever they do for a living, if they will come to my house and do it for free. And they won't. So, you know, we all like reinforcers. There is nothing wrong with reinforcing to get people to learn proper things, and it's not bribery. Beliefs. One of the beliefs that I dealt with throughout my career was with, and I understand this very much so, but ADHD kids, parents, I'm not going to give my child any medication. And I understand that position. My child was ADHD, and we didn't medicate him till the 5th grade. We used behavior management, a lot of other things. But the 5th grade, we reached a point where it was the best choice. And that's what you're looking for, is not what you believe, but what works. And the truth is, when I educated parents regarding medication, most of them were had a different way of looking at it. Their belief system had changed. For example, you have to ask yourself, what's the effects of not medicating? And the effect is, for kids who need medication, aren't on medication, they're going to lose 1 academic for every 6 years of school. Kids who need medication, aren't medicated, have a higher risk of substance abuse. They self-medicate. And so when you get to the facts and you look at the facts, it's a lot easier to make the decision. But if I have this belief system, I think it was I think I quoted this last week, Winston Churchill, who said, the desire to believe something is more powerful than the facts. You want to try to get the facts. You want to try to do what works, not what you want to work. The biggest obstacle to being a good problem solver is we don't like the solution. With teenagers, I would do this thing when we would talk about problem solving, and they would just keep making the same mistakes over and over. And I would say, okay, I've got a problem I want you to help me solve. I want plenty of money where I'm secure, I can travel, I have a nice home, I have a car, things like that. What can I do to solve that problem? Get a job. No, I'm not going to work. And then they would go on and list things, and I would keep saying, no, I'm not going to work. And then I would make the point, how many of you want good grades? How many of you want to study? We're the same. I'm looking for a job where I don't have to show up and I still get paid. You're looking for A's and not have to study. What are the facts? Acceptance of reality. We talked about this last week. What is the reality? For most people, if they're going to make reasonable grades, they're going to have to study. For most people, if they're going to have financial security, they're going to have to work. It doesn't matter what you would like. What is the reality? And so this is part of changing beliefs, our own. So the greatest obstacle is we don't like the solution. So maybe the best thing for your child is medication, but you don't like it. I understand that. I hate taking medication myself. If a doctor prescribes medication for me, do I have to take it? Is there any other option? Can I exercise, change my diet, do anything like that to avoid taking medication? I get that. But are you going to do what you want? Or are you going to do what works and is best for you and your child? And that's where you try to get. And that's a tough place to get as a parent. This is what makes parenting difficult and challenging. And those are some of the things that limit problem solving. Emotion, that's one of the things that can really get in the way. Our emotions, what we feel and so forth, can interfere and cloud our ability to see what really is best for our child or our family. So attitudes of a good problem solver, I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. Like, problems are normal. Everybody's going to have problems. If you think you shouldn't have problems, then you're going to, and you have a problem, then you're going to get frustrated, you're going to get overwhelmed, so forth and so on. Problems are manageable. If you've solved one problem in your life, then you can say, I have the ability to solve problems. That's a true and helpful statement. Problems are a cue for action. So if what I'm doing is not working, then I need to do something different. I need to take action. And finally, problems need planning. You don't just impulsively decide, I'm going to do this. You think about your options. You think about consequences. So steps for problem solving: define the problem. Generate alternatives. You brainstorm. The idea here is you don't evaluate. You don't think of what the good ideas are. You just think about possible solutions. Now, why is it you don't think of good ideas? because what you think is a bad idea may be what works. You're looking for what works, not who has the best idea. And so that's the idea of being willing to look at and not evaluate. The more ideas you come up with, good problem solvers are the ones that generate the most alternatives. Doesn't matter what setting, whether it's in the business world, personal, coping, whatever it may be. So it's quantity before quality. And then you go back and you look at the consequences of each action. You know, one of the things I would do with kids is you're at a party and your friends are encouraging you to smoke pot. What are your options? And I did a lot of work with juvenile delinquents within the juvenile justice system. And you wouldn't believe what I could get a 15, 16-year-old to do for a Tootsie Roll. It was incredible. So I would say, what are possible solutions? Call my parents, say no. They would give me all the good ones. And finally somebody would say, smoke the pot, and I'd throw them a Tootsie Roll. And the idea is don't evaluate. Don't look at the good answers, because what you think is a good answer may not be what works. And I'll give you an example of this in just a moment. Now, I would go back and clarify, I'm not suggesting you smoke pot. We're just doing this exercise. And the idea of brainstorming, this is where the creativity, if you just think of what you think is good, you're stymieing the creativity. And then you decide on the best solution. Then you pick the solution and verify the results. So you try it. If it works, you keep doing it. If it doesn't work, you go to the next possible solution. If it works, you keep doing it. If it doesn't work. And so the idea is you don't run out of ideas. You keep trying till you figure out what works best. So an example, and I think I used this last week, my daughter was in gymnastics, and she was working out one day a week and just in a kind of a club, and so she was invited to join a team at Pensacola State College. This is when she was in late elementary, I guess, and they had a really good team there, a good coach. And so she wanted to join the team. Well, to join the team, it meant she had to work out from 5 to 8 Monday through Thursday and 4 to 6 on Friday. And she was struggling some with her grades. She studied really hard, worked hard, but in math particularly, she had some not so good grades. I was helping her. We would spend hours at night sometimes trying to help her understand it. And of course, she would accuse me of being stupid and not teaching the way the teacher teaches and so forth. And we would have our battles and so on. But she said, I can do this. And I said, okay, this is the deal. We'll try. And I didn't think it would work. I mean, I was really against it, but she really wanted to try it. And for whatever reason, Holy Spirit, whatever it was, said, give it a try. And so I said, we'll try it, and as long as your grades don't fall, you can stay in. Well, she became the best student in terms of organization. Now, she still struggled with math, but it wasn't due to lack of effort. By 5 o'clock, she had her homework done. She never watched TV. Her study habits were incredible, and she carried that through college and got a nursing degree and so on. But it was her idea, and fortunately, I didn't get in the way of it. And so you try things, and when, especially teenagers, when they come up with ideas that they're invested in, if it's within reason, give it a chance to work, build in some safety nets so that they learn, hey, I can problem solve, I can do this, and come up with the ideas. Now, if her grades had dropped, then I would have stuck with the idea, you can't be on the team. I wouldn't have given in because she was unhappy about it. But Didn't have to because she made it work. So sometimes your kids will invest in their ideas, and you may need to give it a chance, even though you're somewhat reluctant. All right, I'm going to stop there. Thoughts, questions, comments?
And before we do this, just to let everyone know, we are recording, so I will give you a mic for you to say your question into, so people can go back and watch this later.
Thank you. Forgot that. Thoughts or comments?
Whenever you're problem solving, like say for, like you said, the morning and bedtime is the hardest time, which is true for me. When you're problem solving, do you include the child, like for example, they don't want to go to bed on time, do you approach it with them to problem solve, to try to come up with a solution, or how would you suggest?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question. I meant to mention it. With teenagers, I will include them, and the way I do it, and I do this with couples as well, is each person, you define the problem together, and then each person comes up with a list of ideas that they think would work. And then you combine the list, and then each of you go through and evaluate it. And then you try to pick the ones that you both agree are possible solutions to try first. If you can't agree, then you say, okay, we'll try one of yours, and if it doesn't work, we'll do one of mine. And we'll go back and forth till we figure out what works. This isn't about us doing what we want. This is about us figuring out what works best. And really trying to frame it in that terminology. I find teenagers more open to it. But yeah, I would include teenagers in that process. Younger kids, it kind of depends on their verbal and where they're at cognitively and developmentally.
Hey, Dr. Hodges. So I have a question, I guess just tactically. Whenever it's the heat of the moment, I've got young boys. Whenever I'm upset or, stressed out, what's something you could teach us, I guess, to not kind of lose cool or get upset whenever they're kind of being irrational and it's causing me to want to become irrational?
Well, my standard answer is prayer and perseverance. There are situations that it is natural to react. But what I really encourage is to think about what you're thinking that is increasing your own frustration, the ABCs. What thought am I having that is causing me to escalate? And the second thing is remind yourself of what your goal is. Is my goal to express my frustration, or is my goal to correct this behavior? And so that you have a longer term goal and perspective rather than just in the moment. There are times where we need to get in the moment. Like with anxiety, if you're anxious, most of the time anxiety is about predicting the future. And so one of the ways you do it is, it's called mindfulness. It's been around for thousands of years, but it's now become popular again. And the idea of mindfulness is to get in the moment. So right this moment, what is it that I need to be afraid of? Is there a tiger? Is there a bear chasing me? What is it that I'm afraid of? And most of the time, there's nothing in the moment. And so if I can just stop and think I'm okay right this moment. There are other times where we got to project into the future and get out of the moment. And usually that's anger and frustration. And have to think about, okay, what's my goal here? And what am I modeling? What am I teaching my kids with this frustration? And you need to be patient with yourselves. Just like you need to be patient with your kids, you are not perfect. Nobody in this room is perfect. I have made plenty of mistakes, I promise you. And I have the knowledge base, but it is hard being a parent. And be patient with yourself. Once you lose it, you don't feel good about it, try to figure out, okay, what do I do next time? Use that as what am I going to say to myself? What did I say to myself this time that probably increased my frustration? What will I think and do next time this happens? And so that you do a fire drill. You're trying to be proactive. And so to change, you think about what you need to think differently and what you need to do differently. And you plan for the next time. And forgive yourself. I mean, it's tough.
I'm curious your advice on how to parent a child who's splitting time with two different parents, two different households, and they're getting to do something by one parent that you do not agree with, and they ask to do it when their time with you, and you don't let them, and they feel like you're being unfair. I'll give you a specific example so you can address it. He's allowed to skip school for mental health day occasionally, not because he's sick or anything, just for mental health. I disagree with that completely. But when he's with me, he wants to take advantage of that occasionally, and I refuse, and he thinks I'm being, unfair. So I was curious, how you address that with him.
Well, the first thing is, anytime the parents are divided, the child is going to use it. Good kid, tall kid, short kid, big kid, little kid, that is a natural child behavior. And so there is nothing wrong with the child who does that. They're just being who they're supposed to be. The issue is between the parents. And the parents have to have communication. And if there is a disagreement, again, go into the problem solving. Okay, let's try it your way. If it works, we'll keep doing it. If it doesn't, then we'll try it my way. But there has to be an agreement that the parents both will be consistent with. And that consistency among the parents is probably more important than the issue itself in the long-term development of the child. But yeah, divided parents, kid is going to use it, and if they can go to one parent and bypass the authority over the other, what they're learning is non-compliance. And that is very risky for kids. And kids are going to try it. They're going to try to divide. If there is an intergenerational coalition against the other parent, not a healthy thing. And so that becomes an issue with the parents. And sometimes, parents who go through divorce think that they won't have to communicate with the other parent. If you have kids, you are totally mistaken. I have did a lot of work with collaborative divorce, and the reason I got into it is because I got caught in the middle of parents who were divorcing and kids who had behavior problems, and I was to see the kids for the behavior problems. Well, my policy was I don't work with kids without working with parents. There are some therapists who work just with kids. I did not do that. I didn't think, because I'm very behavioral. I think the parents have more influence than I'm going to have once a week or once every 2 weeks. And so I would see the parents, and the parents would say to me, we can't be in the same room together. And my statement was, do not expect me to fix what you're screwing up. There is a reality that therapy will not fix certain things that are being maintained in the child's environment. And the parents have to be willing to make the changes. Again, are you going to do what you feel like doing, or are you going to do what's best and solve the problem for your child? And those are tough. I mean, I get it, I understand it. But one rule is very important. As best you can in both houses. And I understand there's differences, and you're not going to get that perfect, but the closer you can get, if it's a divorce situation, the better for the child. More consistency.